Welcome. Welcome back to the Ethereal Archive, dear dreamer. Tonight feels different. The candles flicker with unusual patterns, and there's a salt-sweet scent in the air, as if the sea itself has wandered into our sacred halls. I've discovered something extraordinary this evening. Tucked between the usual shelf of dragons and magic and science and fairy tales, a collection bound in weathered leather, its pages yellowed like old parchment left too long in ocean mist. The title reads simply, Tales from the Driftwood Tavern, and beneath it, in smaller script, for those who wait by dark waters. As I open the first page, I can almost hear it, the distant crash of waves, the creak of ship timbers, and something else, a voice, warm and weathered humming, speaking from beside a crackling hearth. Let me share this tale with you, exactly as it was meant to be told, by firelight, with the storm gentle outside and the taste of mystery in the air. Close your eyes. Let your breathing slow, and imagine yourself in a warm inn by the sea, where the bartender knows every story, and every story holds a grain of ancient truth.
Storms gentler tonight, just the kind that makes the wood creak. Ale taste better, and stories mesmerizing. You've picked the right story, dreamer. Now lean close and take deep breaths, and I'll tell you a tale older than this hearth, one with fog, a love that outlasted the tide, and a light that still burns to this day. We call it the widow's Dreamcatcher. Narration was a tiny coastal village, the kind that isn't on most maps. Just cliffs, gulls, and folk who knew the sea better than their own beds. The village sat where the whispering coast met the forgotten sea, where ancient magic still flowed in the tides, and where the boundary between our world and the realm of spirits grew thin with each sunset. Nymeria Ashane arrived on a windless dusk, cloaked in grey, her boots soaked in grief. They say she came from the inland kingdoms, but the sea salt in her hair told a different story, as if the ocean itself had called her home. They say her husband, Omar, was lost to a storm before their first anniversary. His ship, the Moon Whisper, had set sail on what should have been calm seas. But the forgotten sea keeps its own counsel, and sometimes it keeps what it claims. But Nymeria, she carried with her a copper lantern, ornate and ancient, covered in symbols that seemed to shift in the firelight. And she said gently, her voice like distant music, "He promised he will find his way back. I promised I will wait." Every evening, As the twin moons rose over Noyagel, she'd walk to the far end of the pier, past the fishing boats, past the lighthouse, to where the wooden planks stretched into darkness. There she would light that lantern and sit with it till sunrise, not speaking, not weeping, just waiting for years. And stranger still, the flame never died, not once. Rain, wind, salt spray, the fierce storms that could tear roofs from houses didn't matter. The lantern stayed lit, burning with a flame that seemed to come from somewhere beyond this world. The fishermen would pass her on their way to sea, and they'd nod respectfully. Sometimes she would nod back, her lovely face trying to smile to cheer them. Sometimes it seemed like she could not see anything but the horizon. But everyone recognized something in her vigil. Something that spoke to every sailor's heart, every woman's passion, every child's innocence. They all yearned for someone with her love in their lives. Years passed like seagulls on the wind. Children became adult with kids. Boats came and went. Seasons turned from storm to calm and back again. Years turned into decades. But Nimera never aged, not a wrinkle, not a grey hair, as if time itself had agreed to wait with her, to honour her promise with its own patience. Every day she would head to the edge of the sea and wait with her lantern, with her warm, delicate light. Some whispered she was a witch, others said the lantern was cursed, filled with dark magic that bound her to this endless waiting. But no one had the heart or the courage to hurt her. Outside world did not deserve something this primal. But those who really watched, who truly listened, they knew better. Evil or not, no one was ever hurt around her. They said they heard Nimera humming, soft lullabies, songs of old love, in language unknown, melodies that seemed to calm the very waves. Her voice would drift across the water on still nights, and mothers would find their babies sleeping more peacefully. Sailors would feel their homesickness ease. It didn't feel like a curse. It felt like hope. Kids who grew old watching her hoped she found her peace, like they found her lantern's light comforting. Some of the village men, drawn by her ethereal beauty and the mystery that surrounded her, they came courting, bringing flowers from the meadows, exquisite jewelry, promises to love her until they died, letters written in careful script. But Nimera never responded, never even seemed to see them even while they talked to her. Her eyes were always on the horizon, always watching, always waiting. Sometimes sobbing when someone raised their voice, sometimes wincing when someone seemed genuinely sad. And those who tried to force themselves into her life, who couldn't accept her gentle rejection, they found themselves drawn to the tavern, drinking more and more, until the sea seemed to call to them in the dark hours and drowned them. But still, she continued humming. She continued to live in her cabin by the sea, visiting the shore every single night. Villagers began to tell tales, stories that grew with each telling. They spoke of seeing the lanterns glow beneath the waves. Pearl divers claimed they could breathe longer if they could see the light on the piers, as if the light watched over the ocean's depths, protecting the living, guiding lost souls. Fishermen swore the light guided their nets, that schools of fish would swim toward its warm glow, drawn by something powerful. Their catches grew larger, their voyages safer, and they began to leave small offerings at the base of the pier where she sat with her lantern. Within decades of her arrival, once an unknown fishing town slowly became more prosperous. No one slept hungry. Slowly, no one remembered how long had Nimira Ashane stayed with them. Some nights, lost animals would return to the village. Dogs that had wandered into the wild, cats that had been missing for months, all found sitting peacefully near the lantern, as if they'd been guided home by its radiance. Once, a missing child was found asleep near the pier, little Mira, who had wandered off during the harvest festival. She was curled beside the lantern, unharmed and dreaming. When she woke, she spoke of a beautiful lady who had sung her to sleep, keeping the kid warm until the dawn, who had promised that everyone finds their way home eventually. The townsfolk grew divided. Some feared Nimira's presence, crossing themselves when they passed the pier, whispering prayers against witchcraft and dark magic. Others left offerings by her doorstep. Flowers, shells, letters asking for blessings, for loved ones at sea, for safe returns. Nimira never asked for anything, never opened the gifts, never acknowledged the offerings. But each morning, she would gather them gently and place each one beside the lantern, arranging them with the same care a mother might show, tending her children's presents. Over time, a small shrine formed around the lantern's base. Shells and flowers, letters and small trinkets. Photographs of loved ones lost to the sea. And strangely, the tide never touched it. Even during the highest storms, the shrine remained untouched, as if the ocean itself respected this sacred space. Decades slowly turned into a century. The mist grew thicker around her cabin. Stories grew wilder. The boundary between legend and truth became as thin. One man, old Henrik, the rope maker, claimed the lantern spoke to him during his final illness. He said he'd wandered to the pier in his fever, seeking the cool night air, and the lantern had pulsed with warm light, offering comfort in his darkest hour. He lived another 10 years after that night, claiming he'd been given time to say proper goodbyes. Others swore they saw a figure in the water, Omar's shape, drifting just beneath the waves, reaching upward toward the light. His face peaceful, patient, as if he too was waiting, counting the days, until some cosmic appointment could finally be kept. One old sailor, Captain Finch, came each year on the anniversary of a terrible shipwreck, the night he'd lost his entire crew to a sudden squall. He would sit beside Namira in respectful silence. She sometimes smiled sadly at him. Sometimes she completely ignored him. When others asked, why does he visit her every year? He simply said he could see all his crewmates reflected in the lantern's golden glow. Their faces peaceful, their voices whispering that they were safe, that they are on distant shores, the grandchildren of those who first watched Namira arrive now speak of her as legend, passed down like a lullaby on the wind. They call Namira the Lantern Lady. Some were afraid, others fascinated, but all of them understood that she was part of their world now, as permanent as the lighthouse, as essential as the tide. One spring evening, as the 11th tide approached, a traveller stopped by our tavern. He was gentle-eyed and sea-worn, like he'd walked straight from a painting of ancient mariners. His clothes were cut in an old fashion, and they smelled of salt and distant shores. He had the look of a man who'd travelled far, not just in distance, but in time itself. He sat by the fire, ordered drinks that he barely touched, and listened, just listened, as everyone spoke of village matters, of fishing, of weather, of the strange woman who waited on the pier. When we mentioned the Namira and her lantern, he smiled, a quiet, knowing thing, like someone recognizing an old friend in a story. His eyes grew bright with unshed tears, and he whispered a single word: finally. That night, as the twin moons reached their perfect alignment, he walked the path to the pier. The fog was heavy, thicker than it had been in years, rolling in from the sea like the breath of sleeping giants. But the lantern glowed through it all, cutting through the mist like honey poured through water. Namira sat on the edge, staring at the sea. As always, her grey cloak wrapped around her shoulders, her face turned toward the horizon. The lantern in her hands pulsed with steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, like a prayer made visible. But when the traveller's footsteps echoed on the wooden pier, when she heard that familiar cadence, the pattern of steps she'd memorized a lifetime ago, Namira turned and gasped, not in fear, but in joy so pure it seemed to light the very air around her. "Oh, Ma," she whispered, her voice breaking like waves on stone, like a dam finally giving way after holding back an ocean of longing. He didn't say a word, couldn't say a word. The emotion was too vast for speech, too deep for mere language. He took a deep breath and simply opened his arms, and she ran to him, the lantern still clutched in her hands, its light growing brighter with each step. They held each other there. Come morning, the pier was empty. Her cabin was gone. Shrine untouched. No Chimera, no traveller, no lantern. Just the usual sounds of gulls and waves, of fishermen preparing their nets, of life continuing as it always had and always would, until someone realized an entire town appeared across the shore. Feeling indescribable emotions within them, but there were signs of Chimera's departure. Subtle things that those who looked closely could see. Footprints in the morning dew. 2 sets leading towards the sea. And there, growing from a crack in the wooden rail where she usually sat, where no plant had ever taken root before, a single wildflower, impossible and beautiful. Its petals the same copper colour as the vanished lantern, glowing softly in the dawn light. Some say the sea had finally returned what it had taken, that Omar had been waiting too, in the realm beneath the waves, counting the same days, marking the same years, until the cosmic balance was right for his return. Others say the lantern had been a bridge, a beacon spanning the gap between life and death, between hope and fulfillment, and once its purpose was complete, once the waiting was over, the bridge could finally be crossed. But I'll tell you what I believe, friend. What I've come to understand in all my years of listening to stories by this fire, watching the tide come and go, seeing love in all its forms. Sometimes, love holds on long enough to bring someone home. Love doesn't bow to death, doesn't accept defeat, doesn't understand the word impossible. It simply waits and believes and burns steady in the darkness until the moment comes for reunion. And when it does, when that perfect moment finally arrives, it leaves no grief behind. On moonless nights, when the darkness is thick as velvet, a warm amber glow is sometimes seen beyond the horizon. Not a ship, not a star, not anything that belongs to our everyday world. Just the faintest flicker, like a distant candle, like a promise remembered, like love itself made visible in the darkness. And now, people don't fear it. They say it's her, them, watching over all who wait, all who hope, all who refuse to let go of love, guiding lost ships home, blessing new marriages, offering comfort to the grieving. Fishermen began leaving a lantern lit on their boats, in her honor. Wives and husbands whisper her name when parting at the docks, asking for protection, for safe return, for love strong enough to weather any storm. And those who sit long enough by the sea, in the quiet hours when the world grows still, sometimes they hear it, humming, a song so soft it might be the wind, might be the waves, might be imagination. But those who've loved deeply, who've waited faithfully, who understand the true power of devotion, they know better. It's a lullaby for those who wait, a promise that love endures, that faith is rewarded, that no vigil kept in love is ever truly solitary. And so ends this tale from the Driftwood Tavern, this story of love that refused to surrender, of faith that burned bright through decades of darkness. So when you're near the sea and the fog rolls in thick, don't be afraid of the light. Not every flame is a warning. Some are a welcome. Some are beacons calling us home. And some stories, they don't end in sorrow. They end in reunion, in peace, in the quiet joy of promises kept and love rewarded. The candles burn lower now in our archive, but their light remains steady, just like the lantern, just like love itself. Constant, faithful, eternal. Let this story settle into your dreams. Let Namira's patience inspire your own faith. Let Omar's return remind you that love finds a way, always finds a way.
And so ends this tale from the Driftwood Tavern. This story of love that refused to surrender, of faith that burned bright through decades of darkness. So when you're near the sea and the fog rolls in thick, don't be afraid of the light. Not every flame is a warning. Some are a welcome. Some are beacons calling us home. And some stories, they don't end in sorrow. They end in reunion, in peace, in the quiet joy of promises kept and love rewarded. The candles burn lower now in our archive, but their light remains steady, just like the lantern, just like love itself, constant, faithful, eternal. Let this story settle into your dreams. Let Namira's patience inspire your own faith. Let Omar's return remind you that love finds a way, always finds a way. Rest now in the knowledge that somewhere, in the space between waking and sleeping, between hope and fulfillment, between the pier and the horizon, love keeps its vigil.